The massive hangar of the Earth spaceship Perseverance was filled with the sounds of welding torches and repair tools. Captain Miller walked slowly between the rows of spacecraft, each step making him feel heavier than the last. These ships weren't what anyone would call a proper fleet. They were old, beaten up, and barely holding together. Some of them had been flying for longer than most of his crew had been alive. He stopped near an old fighter where Lieutenant Roberts was working. She had grease streaks on her face, and her uniform was dirty from crawling around inside the ship's engine all day. The fighter she was fixing was at least 30 years old, built during the first days of space exploration when humans were just learning to reach for the stars. "How's it looking?" Miller asked, though he already knew the answer wouldn't be good. Roberts slid out from under the fighter and wiped her hands on an old rag. "Well, sir, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is I got the targeting computer working." She paused and gave a small laugh. "The bad news is it only works if we're pointing the ship at a 45-degree angle to the target." Miller nodded, trying to hide his worry. This was what they had to work with: broken computers, patch-up jobs, and ships that should have been turned into scrap metal years ago. The Earth Defense Force had given them everything they could spare, but that wasn't saying much. Most of their good ships had been destroyed in the first wave of the Dominion's attack. Around them, other crew members were working on their own ships. Some were old cargo vessels that had been carrying food and supplies between Earth's colonies just a few months ago. Now they had guns attached to their sides and makeshift armor welded to their hulls. Others were mining ships, designed to break up asteroids for their minerals. The mining lasers were still there, but they had been adjusted to serve a new purpose. "At least the engine still works properly," Roberts said, patting the old fighter's hull. "She might not be pretty, but she'll fly." Miller walked over to one of the viewing windows. Beyond the safety of their hangar, he could see Earth floating in the darkness of space. It looked peaceful from up here, but he knew better. Somewhere out there, the Dominion's fleet was preparing for their next attack. Their ships would be perfect, gleaming metal monsters with the latest weapons and technology. They probably didn't have a single loose bolt or malfunctioning system. The captain's tablet beeped with a new message. It was from Engineer Thompson down in the maintenance bay. "Sir, we've managed to get 3 more fighters working. Had to take parts from 5 other ships to do it, but they'll fly. Also, we found a way to boost power to the cargo ship's shields. They won't stop a direct hit, but they might give us an extra few seconds in a fight." That was how they were surviving. Taking pieces from one broken thing to fix another, finding new ways to use old technology, and hoping it would be enough. The Dominion probably thought they were crazy, trying to fight their advanced warships with what amounts to space junk. A loud crash from across the hangar made Miller turn around. One of the mining ships had dropped a piece of armor plating. The sound echoed through the large space, making several people jump. As crews rushed to fix the problem, Miller noticed something interesting. The way they worked together, no one needed to be told what to do. Everyone just knew their job and did it. That was the real strength of his fleet. Not the ships, not the weapons, but the people. Every person on board had learned to be more than their original job. Cargo pilots had become fighter pilots. Maintenance workers had become weapons experts. Mining engineers had turned their rock-cutting tools into ship-killing weapons. Miller's tablet beeped again. This time, it was a message he'd been dreading. Their scouts had spotted Dominion ships moving toward one of Earth's outer colonies. They would have to fight soon, ready or not. He called all crew members to the main briefing room. It was crowded. The room wasn't designed to hold so many people at once. Some sat on the floor, others stood against the walls. All eyes were on him as he pulled up the scout report on the main screen. "I know what they see when they look at us," Miller said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "They see old ships, outdated technology, and desperate people. They think we're going to be an easy target." He paused, looking at the faces around him. "But they don't understand what they're really seeing. Every patch on our hulls is a problem we solved. Every jury-rigged system is proof that we can adapt. Every mixed-up crew is showing that we're more than our training. Roberts raised her hand. Sir, about the targeting computers. I know, Miller said. We've got ships that can only target at certain angles. We've got cargo vessels that shake when they fire their weapons. We've got mining lasers that might burn out after one shot. He smiled. But that's what they gave us to work with, so that's what we're going to use to win. The room was quiet for a moment. Then someone in the back started laughing. Others joined in. It wasn't happy laughter. It was the kind that comes when something is so ridiculous you have to either laugh or cry. Thompson, Miller called out to his engineer. How many of our ships can actually fight? Thompson stood up, consulting his own tablet. We've got 15 fighters that can fly, though 5 of them have weapons problems. 7 cargo ships with working guns, but their targeting systems are basic at best. 4 mining ships with their lasers converted to weapons. And the Perseverance herself. He looked up. It's not much of a fleet, sir. No, Miller agreed. It's not much of a fleet. But it's our fleet. He brought up an image of the colony they needed to defend. The Dominion thinks they know what they're facing. They expect us to fight like they do, with proper tactics and standard formations. They expect us to give up when their superior technology proves too much for our old ships. He switched the display to show their own vessels. But we're going to show them something they've never seen before. We're going to show them what happens when you back humans into a corner with nothing but spare parts and determination. The briefing continued as Miller laid out their defense plans. They weren't fancy plans. They couldn't be, with ships that barely worked properly. But they were plans that used every quirk and problem to their advantage. If a fighter could only target at 45 degrees, then they'd use that limitation to surprise the enemy. If a cargo ship's guns shook when firing, they'd use that shake to spread their shots wider. As the crews filed out to prepare for battle, Miller stayed behind, looking at the display of their mismatched fleet. On paper, they didn't stand a chance. The Dominion ships would outclass them in every way. But papers and statistics didn't tell the whole story. These ships might be scrap, but they were their scrap. Every dent and patch and jury-rigged system was a story of human stubbornness, of refusing to give up just because the odds were bad. The Dominion was about to learn a very important lesson. Never underestimate people who can make weapons out of junk and victories out of defeats. The first battle went exactly as everyone expected, badly. The Dominion ships appeared from hyperspace like angry wasps, their metal hulls shining in the starlight. They moved with perfect precision, their formations so exact they looked like computer animations rather than real ships. Miller watched from the bridge of the Perseverance as the enemy approached. His hands were steady on the controls, but his mouth felt dry. The Dominion fleet was everything their scouts had reported and worse. Each ship looked like it had just left the factory, their weapon systems glowing with barely contained power. All ships, report in, he ordered over the radio. One by one, his mismatched fleet checked in. The voices were nervous but determined. They all knew what they were up against. Sir, Roberts called from her fighter. My targeting computer is still stuck at that 45-degree angle. Should I head back to base? Negative, Lieutenant. Stay in formation. We'll work with what we have. Miller looked at his tactical display. The Dominion ships were spreading out, probably wondering why such a small fleet of junk ships would dare to face them. The first shots came from the Dominion. Their energy weapons lit up space like lightning, cutting through the darkness toward Earth's defenders. Miller watched as one of his cargo ships took a direct hit. But instead of exploding, the ship's thick hull, designed to survive impacts with space rocks, absorbed most of the blast. Thompson. Miller called over the radio. What just happened? The engineer's excited voice came back quickly. Sir, their weapons are calibrated for military-grade shields. Our cargo ships have different shielding patterns. They're not as strong, but they're unpredictable. The enemy's targeting computers don't know what to do with them. It wasn't much, but it was something. Miller ordered the cargo ships to move forward. using their bulk to shield the fighters. The Dominion ships adjusted their formation, probably expecting the cargo ships to be slow and clumsy. They weren't wrong, but they also weren't ready for what happened next. Roberts had figured out how to use her fighter's broken targeting computer to her advantage. She approached the enemy ships at exactly 45 degrees, the only angle where her weapons would work properly. The Dominion pilots, used to fighting ships that could attack from any direction, didn't see her as a threat until it was too late. Her shots weren't powerful, but they hit the enemy ship in places their shields weren't expecting. Small explosions blossomed along the warship's hull. It didn't destroy the ship, but it showed everyone something important. The Dominion ships could be hurt. The mining ships moved in next. Thompson had spent days modifying their industrial lasers, and now they put his work to the test. The beams weren't as focused as military weapons, but they were powerful. When they hit the enemy shields, something strange happened. The unfocused energy scattered across the shield surface, creating weak points. "The mining lasers," Thompson shouted over the radio. "Their frequency is all wrong for their shield systems. It's confusing their computers." Miller watched as his crews began to adapt to the battle. They weren't fighting like a proper military fleet. They couldn't. Instead, they were fighting like what they were, a collection of civilian ships turned into weapons by desperate people. The cargo ships used their bulk to block enemy fire, their thick hulls holding together better than anyone expected. The mining ships fired their lasers not to destroy, but to create gaps in enemy shields. And the fighters, led by Roberts, attacked from strange angles that the Dominion's computers couldn't predict. But they were still losing. 2 cargo ships exploded under heavy fire. A mining ship's engines failed, leaving it drifting in space. Half of the fighters were damaged or destroyed. The Dominion's superior technology was slowly but surely winning the battle. Then Miller noticed something. The enemy ships, for all their power and precision, were becoming confused. Their perfect formations were breaking up as they tried to deal with attacks coming from unexpected directions. Their computers, programmed to fight proper military vessels, were struggling to track ships that didn't behave like they should. "All ships," Miller called out. "Stop trying to fight like they do. Fight like who we are. Cargo ships, use your maneuvering thrusters. Make them guess where you're going. Mining ships, sweep your lasers wide. Make their shields work harder. Fighters, attack from your broken angles. Make their computers deal with impossible math." The battle changed after that. Earth's ships stopped trying to match the Dominion's precision and instead embraced their own chaos. Cargo ships spun and tumbled, their movements random but purposeful. Mining ships fired their lasers in wide patterns, creating webs of energy that the enemy ships had to waste power avoiding. Roberts led her remaining fighters in what looked like a broken formation, but was actually carefully planned around their damaged targeting systems. They approached from angles that seemed wrong, fired when it looked impossible, and somehow kept hitting their targets. The Dominion fleet's perfect formation had completely fallen apart. Their ships were now moving individually, each captain trying to deal with threats that didn't make sense to their tactical computers. Some of their shots missed completely, their targeting systems confused by the erratic movements of Earth's ships. "Sir," Thompson called out, "I figured something out. Their shields, they're programmed to be strongest where they expect attacks. But we're not attacking from normal positions. We're hitting them where their shields are weakest." Miller understood what was happening. The Dominion's technology was too perfect, too specialized. They had built their ships to fight enemies like themselves, with proper military tactics and predictable attack patterns. They weren't prepared for ships that fought like broken machines piloted by crazy people. The battle lasted another hour, but the tide had turned. The Dominion lost 4 ships, not to powerful weapons, but to mining lasers that overloaded their shields, fighters that attacked from impossible angles, and cargo ships that simply refused to be destroyed. When the enemy fleet finally retreated, jumping back into hyperspace with their perfect formation in ruins, Miller's crew didn't cheer right away. They were too busy keeping their damaged ships together, too focused on staying alive. But slowly, as they realized what they had done, the celebrations began. "We got lucky," Roberts said as she landed her damaged fighter. "They weren't ready for us to fight so." "Wrong." Miller shook his head. "Not wrong. Different. They expected us to fight a proper battle with proper ships. Instead, we fought like what we are, people using whatever we have to survive." In the days that followed, as they repaired their ships and counted their losses, Miller's crew learned everything they could from the battle. Thompson studied the data about how their mining lasers had affected enemy shields. Roberts figured out more ways to use broken targeting systems effectively. The cargo ship pilots developed new ways to move their bulky vessels unpredictably. They were learning, adapting, and preparing, because they all knew one thing: the Dominion would be back. And next time, they would be ready with even more strange and impossible ways to fight back. The enemy had superior technology, but Earth's defenders had something better: the ability to turn their weaknesses into strengths and their problems into solutions. 3 months after their first victory, the Earth Defense Force received an urgent message from the Jupiter mining colonies. The Dominion fleet had been spotted approaching the gas giant, probably thinking the civilian mining operations would be an easy target. They were wrong. Miller stood on the bridge of the Perseverance, looking at the massive form of Jupiter filling half the view screen. Around the giant planet, tiny dots of light marked the locations of mining stations and refineries. These weren't military installations. They were industrial sites where humans had been harvesting resources from Jupiter's moons for decades. "Sir," Thompson called from his engineering station, "you need to see what the colonists have done with their equipment." The main screen switched to show images from the largest mining station. Miller's eyes widened as he saw what 3 months of preparation had created. The colonists hadn't tried to turn their facilities into proper military bases. Instead, they had embraced the same crazy thinking that had helped Earth's fleet survive. Huge solar reflectors, normally used to power the mining operations, had been turned into massive space mirrors. They could now focus the intense sunlight from Jupiter's orbit into deadly heat beams. Cargo containers that once held processed metals were now packed with chunks of scrap and turned into space mines. And the automated mining drones, thousands of them, had been reprogrammed for combat. "Those clever devils," Roberts said from her position at Tactical. Her fighter squadron had improved a lot since their first battle. They had learned to work with their broken targeting computers instead of fighting against them. They turned the whole colony into one big trap. Miller smiled as he watched more details come in. The colonists had studied reports from Earth's battles and taken the lessons to heart. They hadn't waited for the Dominion to attack. They had spent 3 months preparing the battlefield. The space between Jupiter's moons was now filled with debris fields that looked natural but were actually carefully planned. Mining ships had created paths through these fields that looked random but would force enemy ships to move exactly where the colonists wanted them. Every piece of junk floating in space was part of their plan. "Dominion fleet approaching," one of the sensor operators called out. 5 capital ships and 20 support vessels. They're moving into attack formation. Miller watched as the enemy fleet approached. Their ships still looked perfect, still moved with mechanical precision. But something was different this time. They moved more cautiously, having learned from their previous battles that Earth's forces didn't fight like proper military units. "All stations report ready," Miller ordered. Around Jupiter's moons, Earth's defenders moved into position. The mining stations powered up their converted solar reflectors. Cargo ships filled with makeshift mines took up hiding positions behind larger pieces of debris. And in the shadow of the moons, Robert's fighter squadron waited. The Dominion fleet reached the outer edge of the mining colony space and immediately ran into trouble. Their advanced sensors, designed to detect military weapons and ships, were overwhelmed by the amount of junk floating around them. Every piece of metal could be a weapon. Every shadow could hide an attacker. "They're trying to map safe paths through the debris," Thompson reported, watching the enemy's scan patterns. Their computers are having trouble telling the difference between our traps and normal mining waste. Miller nodded. That had been part of the plan. The colonists had spent years learning how to find valuable materials among space debris. Now they were using that knowledge to hide their defenses in plain sight. The first Dominion ship to make a mistake was one of their smaller vessels. It tried to take a path that looked clear, but was actually a carefully planned trap. As soon as it passed between two large pieces of debris, dozens of small objects started moving. They weren't missiles or torpedoes. They were mining drones, each one carrying a small but powerful mining charge. The drones swarmed the enemy ship like angry bees. Their charges weren't powerful enough to destroy the vessel, but they didn't need to be. They just needed to confuse its shields, creating weak spots for the real attack. As the ship tried to deal with the drones, one of the solar reflectors turned, catching Jupiter's sunlight and focusing it into a deadly beam. The enemy ship's shields, already stressed from fighting the drones, couldn't handle the sudden heat. Parts of its hull started to glow red, then white. The ship tried to turn away, but the debris field forced it to move slowly and carefully. By the time it escaped the heat beam, significant damage had been done. "It's working," Roberts said with excitement. "Thompson, your crazy plan is actually working." The engineer grinned. "Simple physics. Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons and projectiles. They're not made to deal with focused sunlight and mining explosives. We're not fighting their technology. We're using nature against them." The battle spread out across the space around Jupiter's moons. The Dominion fleet tried to maintain formation, but the debris fields made that impossible. Every time they found what looked like a clear path, they discovered new traps. Cargo containers exploded into clouds of metal fragments. Mining drones appeared from hiding places and attacked. Solar reflectors turned seemingly safe areas into death zones of focused heat. Roberts' fighters added to the chaos. They had practiced for weeks in the debris fields, learning exactly how to use their damage targeting systems in the cluttered environment. While the Dominion ships struggled to get clear shots through the debris, the Earth fighters already knew all the safe angles to attack from. "Their formation is breaking up," Miller observed. The enemy fleet was now scattered across a large area, each ship trying to deal with threats they couldn't properly track or target. Their superior technology was actually working against them. Their sensors were picking up too much information. Their computers were trying to process too many possible threats. The killing blow came when 3 mining ships sprang their trap. They had been hiding inside hollow asteroids, a trick they normally use to protect themselves from Jupiter's radiation. When a Dominion capital ship passed between them, they fired their mining lasers together. The beams, modified to work like the ones that had proved effective in previous battles, hit the enemy ship from 3 different angles. The capital ship's shields overloaded completely. Without protection, its hull couldn't handle the focused energy. The ship didn't explode. It just stopped working, dead in space. That was when the Dominion fleet finally retreated. They had lost 2 ships completely, and 3 others were badly damaged. They had failed to destroy a single mining station or colony ship. The debris field around Jupiter had a few new pieces of junk floating in it, but otherwise, the colonists had won with minimal losses. As the enemy ships disappeared into hyperspace, cheers erupted across all channels. The mining colonies had not only survived, they had proven that humanity's desperate tactics could work anywhere. Their victory would change the way the war was fought. "Send word to Earth," Miller ordered. "Tell them everything that worked here. Every colony, every outpost needs to know that they can fight back. We don't need military bases or proper warships. We just need to be clever and use what we have." The Jupiter colonies had shown everyone something important. The Dominion's perfect technology could be defeated by simple physics and human creativity. The whole solar system was full of tools that could be turned into weapons. They just had to think differently about how to use them. The mood on the Perseverance was different now. The nervous energy of earlier battles had been replaced by something new: confidence. Earth's forces were no longer just defending. They were hunting. Miller walked through the ship's corridors, seeing crews working with purpose instead of desperation. In the main hangar, Roberts was teaching a group of new pilots. She had set up pieces of debris in a pattern that mimicked the Dominion's usual formation. The rookie pilots were learning to attack from specific broken angles, turning their ship's problems into advantages. "Don't fight your targeting computer," she told them, pointing at the practice course. "If it only works at 45 degrees, then make that your strength. The enemy expects attacks from normal angles. They don't expect us to come at them sideways." Miller stopped to watch the training. 6 months ago, they had been scrambling to figure out how to fight with broken equipment. Now they were teaching others to use those same flaws as weapons. It was amazing how much had changed. Thompson waved him over to the engineering bay. The engineer had been busy studying captured pieces of Dominion technology. But instead of trying to copy their advanced systems, he was looking for ways to break them. "Look at this, Stir," Thompson said, pointing to a damaged enemy shield generator. "Their technology is incredible, but it's also fragile. They built everything to work perfectly, which means it falls apart when things get messy." Miller looked at the complex device. It was beautiful, like a piece of art. Every part was precisely made, every connection exactly where it should be. But Thompson was right. It was too perfect. It couldn't handle the chaos that Earth's forces had learned to use as a weapon. "Their entire empire is built on having everything work exactly right," Thompson continued. "Their ships follow perfect patterns. Their weapons use precise calculations. Their shields are tuned to specific frequencies." He grinned. "So we don't try to match their perfection. We throw random junk at them and watch their systems crash." The engineer had developed new weapons based on this idea. They weren't really weapons at all. They were tools designed to create chaos. One was a simple device that fired electromagnetically charged space debris. The random patterns of charged metal confused enemy targeting systems. Another used modified mining scanners to feed false data to Dominion sensors. In the tactical room, Miller found more evidence of how far they had come. The wall screens showed maps of known Dominion patrol routes. Before, these would have been areas to avoid. Now they were hunting grounds. "We've spotted another patrol fleet," one of the tactical officers reported. 3 ships, standard formation. They're following their usual route through the asteroid belt. Miller studied the map. 6 months ago, facing 3 Dominion ships would have been suicide. Now it was an opportunity. "Show me the debris field patterns in that sector." The officer brought up a new map showing all the floating junk in the area. There was a lot of it. Dropped cargo, broken ships, asteroid fragments. To most people, it would look like random space trash. To Miller's crew, it was a ready-made battlefield. "Send word to Roberts," Miller ordered. "Tell her to take her squadron and set up an ambush point here." He pointed to a particularly dense cluster of debris. "And get Thompson's new toys ready. Let's see how their perfect sensors handle some electromagnetically charged junk." The plan came together quickly. This was what they were good at now, turning space junk into weapons and trash fields into traps. The Dominion ships would arrive expecting to find nothing but routine patrol duty. Instead, they would find hell. Roberts' fighters moved into position, hiding among the larger pieces of debris. They didn't need to worry about being spotted. The enemy sensors were too precise to look for ships deliberately hiding in noise. The cargo ships, now expert at playing dead, drifted like abandoned hulks. The Dominion patrol arrived right on schedule. Their ships moved in perfect formation, their sensors sweeping space in precise patterns. Everything about them was orderly, controlled, and predictable. They were about to learn why that was no longer a good thing. The battle started with Thompson's new weapons. The devices looked like broken engine parts, just more space junk floating in the void. But when they activated, they filled the area with electromagnetically charged debris. To the Dominion's sensitive scanners, it was like trying to see through a sandstorm. The enemy ships immediately tried to adjust their sensors, running through standard procedures for dealing with interference. But this wasn't standard interference. Every piece of charged debris created its own magnetic field, making the ship's computers try to track thousands of small anomalies at once. While the Dominion vessels were struggling with their sensors, Roberts led her fighters in the first attack run. They came in at their signature 45-degree angles, using the debris field for cover. The enemy ships couldn't target what their computers couldn't properly track. "Their formation is breaking up," the tactical officer reported. The 3 Dominion ships were moving apart, each trying to find clear space where their sensors could work properly. It was exactly what Miller's forces wanted. The dead cargo ships came to life, their makeshift weapons already aimed at the points where they knew the enemy ships would move. They didn't need precise targeting. They just fired clouds of junk into the space the Dominion ships were trying to escape to. One of the enemy vessels flew right into a cloud of charged debris. Its shields flared as they tried to repel the thousands of small impacts. But the debris wasn't just hitting the shields, it was sticking to them, creating a constantly shifting pattern of magnetic fields that played havoc with the ship's systems. "Look at their energy readings," Thompson said excitedly. "Their shields are using way too much power trying to maintain a perfect barrier. They don't know how to let small hits through to save energy for big ones." The Dominion ships tried to fight back, but their weapons couldn't lock onto anything solid. Every target their computers found was either a piece of debris or a ship attacking from an impossible angle. Their tactics, designed for fighting proper battles against proper military vessels, were worse than useless. Roberts' fighters kept up their hit-and-run attacks, striking from blind spots and retreating into the chaos of the debris field. The cargo ships moved in slowly, using their bulk to hem the enemy vessels into killing zones. And through it all, Thompson's devices kept pumping more charged debris into space. The battle ended in less than an hour. One Dominion ship was completely disabled, its systems overwhelmed by the combination of magnetic interference and constant small impacts. Another had its engines crippled by a lucky shot from Roberts' squadron. The third managed to escape, but not before taking serious damage. As Miller's crews began salvage operations on the captured ships, he realized something important. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were winning. The Dominion's perfect technology and precise tactics had become predictable. Earth's forces, with their broken ships and makeshift weapons, were anything but predictable. "Send the battle data to all Earth forces," Miller ordered. "Every ship, every colony, every outpost. Show them how we did this. The Dominion thinks they know how we fight now, so we keep changing, keep adapting, keep showing them new ways to turn trash into trouble." The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. Humanity had found its strength not in trying to match the Dominion's technology, but in embracing their own chaos. Every piece of space junk was a potential weapon. Every broken system was a chance to do something unexpected. And every battle was a chance to show the enemy that perfection could be defeated by creativity. 1 year after the first Dominion attack, the war was reaching its final stage. The Perseverance's hangar bay looked very different now. The ships were still ugly, maybe even uglier than before, but there was a strange beauty in their patchwork appearance. Every dent, every welded plate, every jury-rigged system told a story of survival and adaptation. Miller stood watching his crews prepare for what they hoped would be the last battle. Roberts was checking her fighter, which now had parts from at least 5 different ships attached to it. The targeting computer still only worked at 45 degrees, but she had added a spinning weapon mount that could turn to match the angle. What had once been a flaw was now the core of her fighting style. Thompson moved between the ships, making final adjustments to his latest inventions. The engineer had turned the study of Dominion technology into an art form, not to copy it, but to find new ways to make it fail. His latest creation used captured enemy communication systems to broadcast confusing signals that made their perfect machines fight with themselves. "Final reports are in," the tactical officer called out. "The Dominion has gathered their remaining fleet for one big push. They're coming with everything they have left. Miller nodded. Intelligence suggested the enemy had assembled over 50 ships, the largest fleet they'd sent against Earth yet. But numbers didn't tell the whole story. The Dominion was desperate now, their perfect world shaken by defeats they couldn't understand. All hands to battle stations, Miller ordered. Around him, crews moved with practiced ease. There was no panic, no fear. They had learned to trust their broken ships and their strange tactics. More importantly, they had learned to trust each other. The Earth fleet gathered near the moon, using its gravity to hide their numbers. They had ships from every colony and outpost, mining vessels from Jupiter, cargo ships from Mars, and fighters held together with spare parts and determination. Each one was unique, modified in ways that would make proper engineers cry. Enemy fleet approaching, sensors reported. They're moving in standard attack formation. Miller smiled. Even now, after all their defeats, the Dominion couldn't break free from their rigid patterns. They still thought that perfect formation and flawless execution would win the day. They still hadn't learned. Launch the first wave, Miller ordered. Hundreds of objects moved out from behind the moon. But they weren't ships. They were pieces of space junk, each one carefully modified by Thompson's team. Some had magnetic charges that would stick to enemy shields. Others contained simple devices that broadcast random signals on Dominion frequencies. The enemy fleet's perfect formation began to waver as their sensors tried to make sense of the cloud of debris heading toward them. Their computers, designed to track military targets, were overwhelmed by thousands of small objects moving in chaotic patterns. Second wave, go, Miller commanded. This time it was Roberts leading her fighter squadrons. They had painted their ships to look like debris, making them blend in with the cloud of junk. The enemy didn't realize they were under attack until the fighters were already firing from their signature odd angles. The Dominion fleet broke formation, trying to deal with threats they couldn't properly target. Their ships fired at shadows, wasted energy shooting pieces of floating metal, and struggled to regroup as the debris cloud wrapped around them like a net. Now the big surprise, Thompson said with a grin. He activated his latest invention, a device that used captured Dominion technology to send false orders to enemy ships. The signals weren't perfect copies, but they didn't need to be. They just needed to create more confusion. Enemy vessels started receiving multiple sets of orders, each one conflicting with the others. Some ships tried to move forward while others retreated. Weapons targeted empty space because sensor data didn't match visual readings. Communication channels filled with garbage data that their computers couldn't ignore. Main fleet, attack, Miller ordered. The real Earth ships moved in, led by the Perseverance. They weren't trying to hide anymore. They wanted the enemy to see what was coming for them. Wanted them to see the cargo ships with their makeshift weapons, the mining vessels with their modified industrial lasers, and the fighters that looked like they belonged in a scrapyard. The battle that followed wasn't pretty. It wasn't fought with elegant maneuvers or precise targeting. It was fought with tricks learned in a dozen desperate battles, with weapons cobbled together from spare parts, and with tactics that broke every rule of space combat. Cargo ships released clouds of metal fragments, creating zones where Dominion targeting systems couldn't function. Mining vessels fired their lasers in sweeping patterns, not trying to destroy enemy ships, but to overload their shields with constant stress. Fighters attacked from blind spots and impossible angles, their broken targeting computers turned into advantages. The Dominion fleet tried to adapt, tried to find ways to counter Earth's chaotic strategy. But they couldn't break free from their programming, couldn't stop trying to fight a proper battle. Their ships were too perfect, their crews too well-trained in standard tactics. They didn't know how to handle enemies that turned their own technology against them. The turning point came when Thompson's false signals caused 3 enemy ships to crash into each other. The accident created a chain reaction, forcing nearby vessels to break formation to avoid the wreckage. In the confusion, Roberts led her squadrons in a massive attack run, all of them firing from that deadly 45-degree angle that had become their trademark. Their flagship is isolated, Tactical reported. "They're trying to restore order, but their communication systems are completely overwhelmed." Miller gave the order he'd been waiting to give. "All ships, concentrate fire on the flagship. Show them what our junk heap can do." Every Earth vessel that could still fight turned their weapons on the Dominion flagship. Mining lasers, makeshift guns, and improvised missiles all struck at once. The enemy ship's perfect shields, designed to handle proper military weapons, couldn't adapt to the chaos of the attack. They collapsed under the strain. The flagship didn't explode. Instead, it just went dark, all its perfect systems overwhelmed by imperfect attacks. As it drifted powerless in space, the rest of the Dominion fleet seemed to lose its will to fight. Ships began jumping away into hyperspace, retreating in groups, and then individually as their formation fell apart completely. When the last enemy ship disappeared, leaving behind a battlefield filled with floating debris and broken vessels, there was no immediate celebration. Miller's crews were too busy keeping their damaged ships together, too focused on survival to realize what they had achieved. But slowly, as reports came in from all sectors, the truth sank in. The Dominion fleet was gone. Their perfect ships had been defeated by machines that barely deserved to be called ships at all. Their flawless tactics had been broken by strategies that ignored every rule of combat. The war ended not with a formal surrender, but with a message received through the very communication system Thompson had built from salvaged enemy parts. The Dominion was withdrawing from Earth's space. They had faced something they couldn't understand, a species that turned weakness into strength and trash into victory. Miller gathered his crew for one final announcement. Looking at their faces, he saw the same mix of exhaustion and pride he felt himself. They had started this war with nothing but broken ships and desperate courage. They had ended it as the rulers of the battlefield. "They sent us to war with scrap," he told his people. "They thought that meant we couldn't win. But they didn't understand what humans can do with broken parts and impossible odds. They didn't understand that sometimes the strongest weapon isn't the most perfect one. It's the one that breaks all the rules." As cheers filled the ship, Miller looked out at his fleet of mismatched vessels. They were still ugly, still held together with patches and prayers. But they had proven something important. In the right hands, with the right spirit, even scrap metal could defeat an empire's perfect machines. The massive warship Steadfast drifted silently through the darkness of space, its hull scarred and blackened. Pieces of metal and debris floated around it like a cloud of dead butterflies. To any watching eyes, the ship looked like just another casualty of the ongoing war between humans and the Coalition. Inside the bridge, Captain James Walker stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the main view screen with steady eyes. The bridge was dark, lit only by the dim glow of essential systems running on minimal power. The air was cold. They'd shut down all non-critical systems to maintain their cover. "Status report," Walker whispered, though there was no real need for silence in space. Old habits died hard. "All systems nominal, Captain," replied Tom from his engineering station. His fingers danced across the darkened console, making microscopic adjustments to keep their power signature as low as possible. "The fake hull damage is holding up perfectly. Anyone scanning us will see exactly what we want them to see." Walker nodded slowly. The damage to their ship had taken weeks to prepare. Every blast mark, every torn piece of hull plating, had been carefully designed to look real while protecting the vital systems underneath. It was an elaborate trap, and everything had to be perfect. "Movement detected, sir," called out Lisa from the sensor station. Her voice was tight with anticipation. 3 Coalition battlecruisers just dropped out of hyperspace. They're at the edge of the sector, about 30 minutes out at their current speed. Walker allowed himself a small smile. "Right on schedule." "Status of our reactor?" "Cold but ready," Tom responded. "We can go from 0 to full power in 15 seconds. The bridge crew worked in near silence as the minutes ticked by. They'd trained for this mission for months. Every person knew their role, knew exactly what to do when the time came. The plan was simple but dangerous. Appear helpless, draw in the enemy, then strike when they least expected it. The coalition ships grew larger on their screen. They were impressive vessels, each one nearly twice the size of the Steadfast. Their hulls gleamed with polished metal, decorated with the red and gold markings of the coalition fleet. They moved with the confidence of predators who'd spotted easy prey. "They're scanning us," Lisa reported, reading standard salvage protocols. "They think we're dead in the water." Walker watched as the enemy ships spread out in a standard salvage formation. It was exactly what they'd hoped for. The coalition's arrogance working against them. They never expected a human vessel to be a threat, especially not one that appeared so badly damaged. "Incoming transmission," said Mike from communications. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies." "Let's hear it," Walker ordered. A deep, authoritative voice filled the bridge. "Attention, disabled vessel. This is General Reed of the Coalition Fleet. Your ship is now under our control. Do not attempt any hostile actions. We will begin boarding procedures shortly." Walker didn't respond. The silence would make them think the Steadfast's communications were damaged. He watched as small dots began to appear on the tactical display. Boarding shuttles launching from the coalition ships. "Multiple boarding craft detected," Lisa confirmed. "They'll be in weapons range in 5 minutes." The tension on the bridge rose with each passing second. Walker could feel his crew's anticipation, their eagerness to spring the trap. But timing was crucial. They had to wait until the coalition ships were fully committed. "Sir," Tom whispered urgently, "one of the false hull plates is shifting. If it moves too much, they might detect our active systems underneath." Walker frowned. This was the risk with their plan. One small detail could give everything away. "Can you stabilize it?" "Working on it," Tom replied, his fingers flying over his console. "Rerouting minimal power to the magnetic clamps. There. That should hold it." The boarding shuttles grew closer. On the main screen, Walker could now make out their details. Sleek, predatory craft designed to cut through a ship's hull and deposit troops. The coalition believed in overwhelming force, using superior numbers to crush any resistance. "Enemy vessels holding position," Lisa reported. "They're in perfect formation for salvage operations." She paused, checking another reading. "Sir, they've lowered their shields. They're not expecting any resistance." Walker allowed himself another small smile. Everything was falling into place. The coalition's biggest weakness was their pride, their absolute certainty that humans were inferior. That pride was about to cost them dearly. "All hands," Walker said quietly into the ship's internal comm system. "Final positions. Prepare for Operation Phoenix." Throughout the massive ship, hundreds of crew members tensed in readiness. In the engine room, engineers stood ready at their stations, prepared to bring the reactor to full power. In the weapon bays, gunners sat at their posts, weapons pre-targeted on the coalition vessels. Every system, every weapon, every person was ready. The boarding shuttles were now less than a minute away. Walker could imagine the coalition troops inside, probably joking among themselves about how easy this mission would be. They'd be expecting to find a dead ship, maybe a few survivors to take prisoner. Instead, they were flying straight into the jaws of a trap. 30 seconds to optimal range, Lisa announced. Walker straightened his uniform, a gesture that his crew recognized. They all tensed, ready for his command. 20 seconds. The coalition ships loomed large on their screens now, their weapons dormant, their shields down, their boarding shuttles exposed. They'd positioned themselves perfectly, exactly where the Steadfast's weapons would do the most damage. 10 seconds. Walker took a deep breath. Months of preparation had led to this moment. One way or another, they were about to change the course of the war. 5 seconds. The boarding shuttles were almost touching the Steadfast's hull now. In moments, they would attach their cutting tools and begin burning their way inside. "Mark." Walker's voice rang out clear and firm. "Execute Operation Phoenix." The bridge erupted into activity. The main lights blazed to life as the reactor surged from dormant to full power in seconds. Throughout the ship, the false hull plates fell away, revealing pristine armor and fully operational weapon systems underneath. The Steadfast transformed from a dead hulk into a fully armed warship in the blink of an eye. On the Coalition ships, alarms would be blaring. But it was already too late. The Steadfast's weapons were powered up and locked on target. The trap was sprung, and the real battle was about to begin. Walker allowed himself one final moment of satisfaction before giving the order that would change everything. All batteries. Fire at will. The Steadfast's weapons blazed to life, streaks of brilliant energy bursting from its hull. The Coalition boarding shuttles never stood a chance. Half of them vanished in balls of fire, while the others scattered like startled birds, desperately trying to return to their motherships. On the bridge of the lead Coalition ship, General Reed stared in disbelief at his tactical display. The supposedly dead human vessel had transformed into a fully armed warship in seconds. His perfectly planned salvage operation was turning into a nightmare. Shields up. Battle stations. Reed roared, but he knew they were already too late. His ships were in the worst possible position, arranged in a salvage formation that left them exposed to enemy fire. They'd walked right into the humans' trap. Back on the Steadfast, Captain Walker was calling out orders in rapid succession. Target their engines first. Don't let them reposition. Tom, give me everything you can from the reactor. Lisa, keep those jamming fields up. I don't want them calling for help. The space around them lit up with weapons fire. The Steadfast's main guns pounded the nearest Coalition ship, its shots finding weak points in the enemy's hastily raised shields. The Coalition vessel shuddered under the impact, pieces of its armor plating torn away by the force of the blasts. "Sir," Lisa called out from her station, "they're trying to coordinate their defense, but our jamming is keeping them from synchronizing their shield frequencies." Walker nodded grimly. This was another part of their plan. The Coalition ships relied heavily on working together, combining their shields and coordinating their fire. By disrupting their communications, the Steadfast was forcing each ship to fight alone. The bridge rocked as return fire finally started coming in. The Coalition ships were recovering from their surprise, bringing their powerful weapons to bear. But they were still out of position, their shots not nearly as effective as they could have been. "Shields holding at 85%, Tom reported. "Those hits aren't as strong as they should be. They still haven't got their weapons fully powered up." Walker watched as another salvo from the Steadfast struck home. The Coalition ship to their right was in serious trouble, its engine section sparking and venting atmosphere. But the other two vessels were starting to maneuver, trying to get into better firing positions. "Sir," detecting power surge from the lead ship, Lisa warned, "they're charging their main weapon array." "Roll ship, present our reinforced ventral armor," Walker commanded. The Steadfast turned gracefully in space, just as a massive beam of energy shot from the Coalition flagship. The blast struck their armored underside, the impact making the whole ship vibrate. Damage report. Shields down to 60% on the ventral side, but armor held. Tom called back. "That was their best punch, Captain. They won't be able to fire that weapon again for at least 3 minutes." Walker allowed himself a tight smile. "Then let's make those 3 minutes count. All batteries, concentrate fire on the damaged ship. Let's take one of them out of the fight." The Steadfast's guns spoke again, this time focusing all their fire on the wounded Coalition vessel. Its shields, already weakened, couldn't withstand the barrage. Explosions bloomed across its hull as vital systems were hit. On the Coalition flagship's bridge, General Reed was furious. "How?" he demanded. "How did they hide all this? Our scans showed nothing." His tactical officer, looking shaken, tried to explain. "Sir, they must have developed some new kind of stealth technology. The damage we saw, it was all fake, carefully designed to hide their real capabilities." Reed slammed his fist on his command chair. The humans had outplayed him completely. His arrogance, his certainty that no human ship could threaten his force, had led them right into this trap. And now one of his ships was about to be destroyed. The damaged Coalition vessel's engines finally gave out. It started drifting, emergency pods launching from its sides, as the crew abandoned ship. The other two Coalition ships tried to move to protect their stricken companion, but the steadfast, superior position made it impossible. "Enemy vessel is disabled," Lisa reported with satisfaction, reading multiple hull breaches and critical system failures. "She's out of the fight, sir." Walker nodded. "Good. Now for the others. Tom, how's our power holding up?" "Reactors running hot but stable, sir. We can keep this up." The battle continued to rage. The remaining Coalition ships were fighting harder now, their initial shock replaced by desperate determination. Energy beams and projectiles crisscrossed the space between the vessels, some finding their marks, others disappearing into the void. The Steadfast took another hard hit, this one catching them on the port side. Warning alarms blared as damage reports came in. "Port shield generator is struggling," Tom announced. "We've got damage control teams responding, but we need to protect that side." Walker studied the tactical display. The Coalition ships were trying to flank them to get to their weakened port side. But that movement was also an opportunity. "Lisa, do we still have the port missile tubes?" "Yes, sir. They're operational." "Load them with our special packages. Let's give our friends another surprise." The Coalition ships pressed their attack, thinking they'd finally found a weakness to exploit. They didn't notice the missile tubes opening on the Steadfast's port side until it was too late. The missiles that launched weren't ordinary weapons. As they approached the Coalition ships, they suddenly split apart, each one releasing dozens of smaller projectiles. These weren't designed to explode. They were electronic warfare devices, tiny but powerful jammers that attached themselves to the enemy ships' hulls. The effect was immediate. The Coalition vessels' shields began to flicker and fail as the devices interfered with their power distribution systems. Their coordinated attack fell apart as their systems were disrupted one by one. "Direct hits," Lisa called out. "Their shield strength is dropping across the board. Their weapons are losing power." Walker straightened in his chair. This was the moment they'd planned for, the reason they'd let themselves take damage to the port side. "All batteries, fire at will. Let's end this." The Steadfast's guns opened up with everything they had. Without their shields, the Coalition ships were vulnerable. Armor plating melted under the barrage, weapons were knocked offline, and engines sputtered and died. On his flagship's bridge, General Reed watched in horror as his mighty force was systematically taken apart by a single human vessel. His tactical officer was shouting something about unprecedented weapon types, about tricks and traps they'd never seen before. But Reed wasn't listening. He was thinking about how badly he'd underestimated these humans, and how that mistake was about to cost him everything. The battle was reaching its end. The Coalition ships, their weapons nearly useless and their shields gone, could no longer effectively fight back. The Steadfast's superior position and carefully planned strategy had won the day. Walker looked at the destruction around them with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. It had been a costly victory. Their ship had taken damage, and people had died on both sides. But they'd proven something important today, that humans couldn't be underestimated, that superior numbers and technology weren't everything. "Sir," Mike called from communications, "we're receiving a transmission from the Coalition flagship. They're surrendering." Walker nodded slowly. "Accept their surrender. Prepare boarding parties." He paused, looking at his crew. "Well done, everyone. Operation Phoenix is a success." The bridge crew cheered, but Walker kept his eyes on the view screen, watching the Coalition ships power down their remaining systems. This victory would change the war, he knew. After today, no one would ever look at a damaged human ship and assume it was helpless. After today, everything would be different. The boarding parties from the Steadfast moved carefully through the Coalition flagship's corridors. Their boots clanked against the metal floor as they advanced, weapons ready. Even though the ship had surrendered, no one was taking any chances. Leading the main boarding team was Commander Bill Roberts, the steadfast security chief. "Keep your eyes open," Bill told his team through the radio. Just because they surrendered doesn't mean everyone got the message. The coalition ship's interior was a mess. The battle had knocked out many systems, and emergency lights cast red shadows everywhere. Damaged circuits sparked in the walls, and the air smelled of burned metal. Every few minutes, the ship would groan and shake as its damaged structure settled. They encountered small groups of coalition crew members along the way, all of them sitting with their hands up, following surrender protocols. Bill's team quickly secured each group, treating them firmly but fairly. They weren't here for revenge. They were professionals doing their job. Back on the Steadfast bridge, Captain Walker was coordinating the entire operation. The view screen showed multiple camera feeds from the boarding teams, along with status updates from around both ships. "Sir," Lisa called from her station, "we're picking up some unusual readings from the coalition ship's engine room. Could be a self-destruct sequence." Walker's expression hardened. "Get me Commander Roberts immediately." Bill's voice came through quickly. "Roberts here, sir." "Bill, you need to get to their engine room now. We're reading possible self-destruct preparations." "Copy that." "Team 2 with me." Bill's team double-timed it through the corridors, following the ship's markings toward engineering. They encountered more resistance here. A group of coalition engineers who hadn't accepted the surrender. A brief firefight broke out, but the human team's superior training showed. They quickly subdued the engineers without any casualties. In the engine room, they found what they were looking for. 3 coalition officers were working frantically at a control panel, trying to override their own safety systems. Bill's team burst in, weapons raised. "Step away from the controls," Bill ordered. "Hands where we can see them." 2 of the officers complied immediately, but the third kept working, his fingers flying over the controls. Bill didn't hesitate. He fired a stun round that dropped the officer before he could finish whatever he was doing. "Engine room secured," Bill reported. "We've got some would-be heroes down here, but the situation is under control." On the bridge of his captured flagship, General Reed sat under guard, watching as human crews efficiently took control of his vessel. His pride was as damaged as his ship, but he was also curious. He'd never seen anything like the tactics the humans had used today. Captain Walker entered the bridge, his uniform neat despite the recent battle. He walked straight to Reed, studying the coalition general with interest. "Your reputation for tactical brilliance is well earned," Reed admitted grudgingly. "I didn't think humans were capable of such deception." Walker smiled slightly. "That's exactly what we counted on, General. Your belief in our inferiority was your weakness. We just had to play to your expectations." Reed nodded slowly. "The damage to your ship, it was all fake. A trap." "Months of preparation," Walker confirmed. "Every blast mark, every piece of debris, carefully designed to hide our real capabilities. We studied your salvage protocols, learned exactly how you'd approach a disabled vessel. Then we just had to wait for the right target." The general's expression showed a mix of anger and respect. "And those devices you used, the ones that disabled our shields, we've never seen anything like them. Human ingenuity, General. We can't always match your technology, so we find ways around it." Speaking of which, Walker turned to one of his officers. "How's the data retrieval coming?" "Very well, sir," the officer replied. "Their computers are providing a wealth of information. Battle plans, fleet movements, technical specifications. It's all there." Reed's face fell as he realized the full extent of the disaster. Not only had he lost 3 ships to a single human vessel, but now the humans would have access to coalition military secrets. This defeat would have consequences far beyond this single battle. Meanwhile, in the Steadfast's medical bay, doctors treated wounded from both sides. The human medics worked just as hard to save coalition lives as they did their own crew members. Several coalition soldiers watched in surprise as their injured comrades received the same level of care as the humans. One coalition officer, being treated for a burned arm, spoke quietly to his human doctor. "We were told humans were savages," he said, "that you didn't value life like we did. But I'm seeing something very different." The doctor smiled as she wrapped his arm. "There's a lot about humans you've been told that isn't true. Maybe it's time your people learned who we really are." Back on the bridge, Walker was receiving updates from throughout both ships. The situation was under control, but there was still a lot of work to be done. The disabled coalition vessel needed to be salvaged, prisoners had to be processed, and their own damage needed repairs. "Sir," Lisa called out, "long-range sensors are picking up more coalition ships. Looks like a response to the distress call that got out before we jammed communications." Walker nodded. They'd expected this. Time to arrival. At least 6 hours at their current speed. More than enough time. Start downloading everything we can from their computers. "Tom, how are the repairs coming?" "We can be back at full fighting strength in 4 hours, Captain." The damage wasn't as bad as it looked. Walker turned to General Reed. "Your reinforcements will find empty space, General. We'll be long gone, along with all your ship's data and some very interesting coalition technology samples." Reed looked at him sharply. "You're not going to destroy my ships." "No need," Walker replied. "By the time your forces arrive, we'll have stripped them of anything useful. The empty hulks we leave behind will be a message, a reminder that underestimating humans is a costly mistake." The next few hours were a flurry of activity. The Steadfast's crews worked efficiently, downloading data, collecting technology samples, and making repairs. They also helped stabilize the coalition ships, ensuring no lives would be lost after they departed. As the deadline approached, Walker made one final tour of his ship, checking on his crew and the prisoners. He found them talking to each other, sharing stories and experiences. Despite being enemies, they were starting to see each other as people rather than just opponents. "It's time," Walker announced when he returned to the bridge. "Begin withdrawal procedures. Let's get our prize home." The Steadfast's engines powered up, their steady hum filling the ship. As they pulled away from the coalition vessels, Walker looked at the battlefield one last time. It had been a victory beyond their wildest expectations, not just in terms of military success, but in changing perceptions on both sides. "Send a message to command," he told Mike. "Operation Phoenix successful. Tell them everything is about to change." The Steadfast jumped into hyperspace, leaving behind 3 damaged coalition ships and countless shattered assumptions about human capabilities. The next phase of the war was about to begin, and nothing would ever be the same. The Steadfast emerged from hyperspace at the edge of human-controlled space. 3 patrol ships immediately moved to intercept them, but backed off when they received the victory codes. Captain Walker watched as the patrol vessels formed an honor escort around his ship. Word of their success had traveled fast. In the ship's main holding area, General Reed sat with his senior officers, all under guard but treated with respect. They were watching a news broadcast that one of the guards had allowed them to see. The coalition leadership was in chaos, trying to explain how 3 of their best ships had been captured by a single human vessel. "They're already calling it the Phoenix Gambit," one of Reed's officers said quietly. "Our entire military doctrine is being questioned. Everything we thought we knew about human capabilities was wrong." Reed nodded slowly. "We became too confident, too set in our ways. We stopped innovating because we thought we were superior. The humans never stopped thinking, never stopped finding new ways to fight." The guard watching them was surprised by their conversation. He'd expected anger or resentment, not this kind of analytical acceptance of defeat. Maybe the coalition forces weren't as arrogant as they'd been led to believe. On the bridge, Walker was in a secure communication with Fleet Command. The faces of 5 admirals looked back at him from the screen, their expressions a mix of satisfaction and concern. "The data you recovered is invaluable. Admiral Stone was saying. "Their fleet movements, their technology specs, this could change the entire course of the war. But there's something else, something we need you to know." Walker leaned forward. "What is it, sir?" "Your victory has had an unexpected effect. We're receiving communications from multiple coalition worlds. It seems your treatment of the prisoners, combined with the shocking defeat of their best ships, has caused some serious political upheaval. There are calls for peace talks." Walker absorbed this news with surprise. They'd hoped to prove humans couldn't be easily defeated, but triggering peace talks, that was beyond their wildest expectations. "There's more," another admiral added. "Some of the coalition's client races are reconsidering their allegiance. They've seen that the coalition isn't invincible. Some are already reaching out to us about possible alliances." In the ship's engineering section, Tom was working with a team of technicians to analyze the coalition technology they'd captured. Some of it was more advanced than human tech, but not in the ways they'd expected. "Look at this," he said to his team, pointing at a power coupling. "They focused so much on raw power that they forgot about efficiency. We could help them improve this by at least 30% just by redesigning the flow regulators." One of his engineers looked up in surprise. "Help them? They're the enemy." Tom shook his head. "Maybe not for much longer. And if we're going to have peace someday, we need to understand each other, both our strengths and our weaknesses." Throughout the ship, similar scenes were playing out. Human crew members and coalition prisoners were talking, sharing stories, finding out that they had more in common than they'd thought. The artificial barriers of propaganda and prejudice were starting to break down. In the medical bay, the coalition wounded were recovering well, thanks to the combination of human and coalition medical techniques. The human doctors had learned some valuable lessons from coalition medical technology, while the coalition medics were impressed by human surgical innovations. "Your people adapt so quickly," a coalition medical officer said to the human chief surgeon. "We spend years perfecting a single technique, but you're always trying new approaches, combining different methods." The surgeon smiled. "That's because we had to. We couldn't match your technology, so we had to get creative. Sometimes having less makes you learn more." Walker was in his ready room, reviewing the after-action reports, when Lisa buzzed him. "Sir, you need to see this. We're picking up massive fleet movements from coalition space." He rushed to the bridge, where the tactical display showed dozens of coalition fleet elements on the move. But they weren't advancing. They were pulling back, consolidating their forces. "They're scared," Lisa said wonderingly. "They don't know if there are more ships like us out there, more traps waiting to be sprung. They're actually retreating from contested systems." Walker studied the display thoughtfully. "They're not just retreating. They're creating space for negotiations. They want to talk, but they need to save face. This way they can claim they're repositioning their forces, not running away." In the ship's mess hall, human crew members had invited some of the coalition prisoners to share a meal. It was against regulations, but Walker had approved it. He understood the importance of these small gestures. "Your food is interesting," a coalition officer said, trying what the humans call pizza. "We never mix flavors like this. Everything in our culture is meant to be pure, separate." "Maybe that's the real difference between us," a human crew member replied. "We believe that mixing things up, trying new combinations, makes everything better, even if it gets messy sometimes." The next few days were filled with debriefings, data analysis, and preparations for their arrival at Earth. The coalition prisoners would be transferred to a secure facility, but already there was talk of them serving as cultural advisors for the peace negotiations. Walker spent time with General Reed, learning about coalition culture and sharing insights about humanity. They were building a foundation of understanding that could prove crucial in the days ahead. "Your trap was brilliant," Reed admitted during one of their talks. "But it was more than just the tactical victory. You showed us something we didn't expect: humanity. Your people treated mine with respect, even after defeating us. That's not how our propaganda said you would behave." Walker nodded. Maybe that's the biggest trap we sprung, showing you who we really are, not who you thought we were. As they approached Earth, Walker gathered his crew for one final address. They stood in the ship's largest cargo bay, humans and coalition prisoners alike, all listening. What we achieved goes beyond military victory, he told them. We proved that courage, creativity, and compassion are more powerful than any weapon. We showed that enemies can become friends, that understanding is better than fear. Whatever happens next, remember this. Change starts with people willing to think differently, to take chances, to see beyond old prejudices. The crew applauded, and to everyone's surprise, so did many of the coalition prisoners. Something had changed in these few days. A glimpse of what might be possible if both sides could move past their fears and assumptions. As Earth grew larger in their view screens, Walker thought about everything that had led to this moment. The months of planning, the risks they'd taken, the lives affected by their actions. They'd set out to prove humans couldn't be underestimated, but they'd accomplished something far more important. They'd opened the door to peace, shown that different species could learn from each other, work together, find common ground. The real victory wasn't in the battle they'd won, but in the future they'd made possible. 6 months had passed since the Steadfast's historic victory. The Great Hall of the Earth Defense Command was filled with representatives from both human and coalition worlds. Captain Walker stood at attention in his dress uniform, watching as human and coalition leaders signed the preliminary peace accords. The journey to this moment had been challenging. After the Steadfast returned to Earth, both sides had to overcome decades of mistrust and propaganda. But the seeds planted during those few days after the battle had grown into something remarkable. General Reed, no longer a prisoner but now serving as the coalition's chief diplomatic advisor, stood nearby. He caught Walker's eye and gave a slight nod. They'd come a long way from that day when Reed had thought he was capturing a helpless vessel. The signing ceremony ended with applause from both sides. As the crowd began to mingle, Walker found himself surrounded by his old crew members, all specially invited for this historic occasion. Hard to believe it all started with us playing dead in space, Tom said, grinning. He'd been promoted to chief engineer of the entire Earth defense fleet, his innovations with coalition technology leading to remarkable improvements in human ships. Lisa, now heading the new Joint Species Technical Exchange Program, nodded in agreement. The best trap we set wasn't the fake damage or the hidden weapons. It was making them see us as people, not just enemies. The success of the Phoenix Gambit, as it had come to be known, had changed military doctrine throughout known space. No one took anything at face value anymore. But more importantly, it had taught both sides the value of looking beneath the surface, of questioning their assumptions about each other. Walker watched as human and coalition children played together in one corner of the hall, part of a new cultural exchange program. They didn't see aliens or enemies. They just saw new friends to play with. It was a powerful symbol of what the future could hold. "Captain Walker," a voice called. He turned to find Admiral Stone approaching with several coalition officials. "These gentlemen would like to discuss your new assignment." Walker raised an eyebrow. This was the first he'd heard of any new assignment. The Admiral smiled. "We're forming a joint task force," one of the coalition officials explained. "A combined fleet of human and coalition ships working together to explore deep space. After seeing how your crew handled first contact situations and cultural exchanges, we believe you're the perfect choice to lead it." The implications were enormous. A joint fleet, sharing technology and expertise, learning from each other's strengths. It was more than just a military operation. It was a statement about the future both sides wanted to build. In another part of the hall, the Steadfast's medical team was deep in discussion with coalition medical officers. The exchange of medical knowledge had already saved thousands of lives on both sides. What had started as battlefield medicine had grown into a comprehensive program of shared research and development. "Remember how surprised they were when we first treated their wounded?" the chief surgeon asked, smiling at the memory. Now we're planning joint hospitals on 3 different worlds. The changes weren't limited to military and medical cooperation. Trade routes were opening up between human and coalition worlds. Cultural exchanges were becoming common. People on both sides were learning each other's languages, customs, and ways of thinking. Bill, the Steadfast's former security chief, was now training the first mixed human coalition security teams. "It's amazing," he told Walker. "They're learning our adaptability, and we're learning their discipline. Together, we're better than either of us were alone." As the evening wore on, Walker found himself on a balcony overlooking the city. General Reed joined him there, both of them contemplating the lights below. "You know what the history books will say?" Reed asked. "They'll say the war ended because of a clever military trap. But we know it was more than that." Walker nodded. "It was about seeing past our fears and prejudices, about realizing that different doesn't mean inferior or superior. It just means different." "My people are learning that lesson," Reed said. "Slowly, but they're learning. Your victory showed us that there's strength in flexibility, in being willing to change and adapt. We've become too rigid, too sure of ourselves." Inside the hall, a group of scientists was presenting the latest results of joint human coalition research projects. The combination of coalition precision and human creativity was leading to breakthroughs neither side could have achieved alone. "Look at that," Tom said, pointing to a display showing a new type of engine. Coalition power systems combined with human control interfaces. 5 years ago, we were trying to blow each other up. Now we're building the future together. The new engine was just one example. Everywhere you looked, the cooperation between humans and coalition was producing remarkable results. Agriculture, medicine, space exploration, environmental protection. Every field was advancing faster than ever before. Walker's old crew had scattered to different assignments now, each playing their part in building this new future. But they still got together regularly to remember that mission, to talk about how a single battle had changed everything. "You know what I think the real turning point was?" Lisa said during one of these gatherings. "It wasn't when we sprung the trap. It wasn't even when we won the battle. It was afterward, when both sides realized we had more to gain by working together than by fighting each other." As the peace ceremony drew to a close, Walker prepared to address the gathered dignitaries. He looked out at the mixed audience, humans and coalition members sitting together, talking, laughing, sharing ideas. It was everything they'd hoped for and more. "6 months ago," he began, "we proved that appearances can be deceiving. A seemingly disabled ship turned out to be a powerful weapon. But we learned something far more important. We learned that old enemies can become new allies, that different ways of thinking can complement each other, that the future belongs to those who are willing to look past their prejudices and see new possibilities." He paused, looking at his old crew members, at General Reed, at all the people who had helped make this moment possible. The Phoenix Gambit wasn't just about military deception. It was about revealing truth, the truth that we're all capable of change, of growth, of seeing beyond our assumptions. Today, as we sign these accords, we're not just ending a war. We're beginning a journey together, one that will take us further than either of us could go alone. The applause that followed came from humans and coalition members alike. As Walker looked out at the crowd, he remembered that moment 6 months ago, when his ship had appeared dead in space, waiting to spring its trap. They'd achieved their military objective that day, but they'd also started something much bigger. The war was over. The future was beginning, and it looked brighter than anyone could have imagined.